Catholic Answers Live. My name is Chris Scheck. I am president at Catholic Answers, and I am your guest host today. Your favorite regular host is Cy Kellett, and he is on a much-needed day of vacation, a much-earned day of vacation, I should say. I don't know if actually he needs it or not. We could all use some vacation, right, Nick? Every now and then, yeah. But in any case, he'll be back in this chair tomorrow, thanks be to God. And with me coming up in the second hour, Jimmy Akin, Open Forum. And as luck would have it, I used this joke yesterday, Jimmy. We have Jimmy on the first hour, too. So 2 hours of Catholic Answers Live, Open Forum. Any questions about the Catholic faith? What the church teaches, why she teaches it, where is that supported in Scripture? What are these strange practices that you Catholics have, et cetera, et cetera? Any questions that you have about the Catholic faith, we are here to answer them and bring you closer to Jesus Christ, we hope, in the process. 888-318-7884. 888-31-TRUTH is the number to get in the queue to ask your question for Jimmy. Jimmy Akin, senior apologist at Catholic Answers and dean of the School of Apologetics at Catholic Answers. Right, Jimmy?
Hey, how you doing? Yeah.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Boy, that's
what's going on with the School of Apologetics.
Amen. And what a joy for me to see that school come to fruition. Been the topic of discussion actually since before I was at Catholic Answers, but a lot of moving parts, the establishment and growth of a video department, getting the right IT in place, a mature press for the written materials, and getting it all coordinated. And that is one of your duties here at Catholic Answers.
And also getting instructors for the courses. And you just recorded a course for us yourself.
Why
don't you tell us about that?
I did. I record this. John Versillo and his video team had the studio set up about a month ago, I guess, up in Vista, which is just north of us. And I recorded a short course that I think we're calling Making Sense of the Inquisition or Understanding the Inquisition, something like that. The Inquisition, of course, and now it's not as long as the one that you've done, Introductory Apologetics or Introduction to Apologetics, or the one that Trent has done. But
it's a short course.
It's a short course, right. And the Inquisition, of course, is one of those neuralgic topics or controversial topics that especially non-Catholics, but not a few Catholics, like to use as a stick to kind of beat the Catholic Church and discredit her. And in fact, it is a complex and involved tale that has to be understood, among other things, in a moral and historical context. And so that's what I try to do in the course of that course.
So you're not saying it's just like all good?
Well, no. In fact, there were some excesses, to be sure. Anything involving people who have a fallen nature, we're going to see.
So you're kind of steering a middle course between Inquisition equals all bad and Inquisition equals all good, and you're kind of like doing that truth thing, right?
Yeah, the truth. That is what we trade in here at Catholic Answers, the truth.
Good,
yeah.
Good. Nice to know we're on brand.
Amen. So, like I say, an involved tale and one with some controversial figures, and also some people who had very, very good motives as well, and that's all part of the story. And I bring it right up to the present day, right down to the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, which finds its origins in the Inquisition. So,
but it does not employ remotely the same theologies.
No, they've given up some of the old methods there. That is certainly true. So that should be out, I think, in early fall. I know that I have to get my study guide into Todd Aguiloro in the publishing department here within a week. So, but I will not be working on that over the next 2 hours. Instead, I'm going to be hosting Catholic Answers Live. Right. And excellent. So 888-318-7884, Open Forum, Catholic Answers Live. Jimmy Akin, senior apologist. Let's go to Anonymous. watching on YouTube Live. Anonymous, thank you for watching on YouTube. Welcome to Catholic Answers Live.
Hello, good to be here.
Great.
So, Jimmy, I remember a call a while back. You're talking about how the human race has gone through different phases of history, and it has different phases of history, and that there are always ups and downs, and that prior to the end of time, there's going to be a major down. And I wanted to ask you, in your opinion, I know it's very speculative, but what could contribute to the end of time and a major downside scenario in human history? I mean, would it be something like a global genocide against Christians or a climate apocalypse, or what are your thoughts?
Well, there are any number of things one could speculate about as playing a part in it. And really, I tend not to go in an overly speculative route because it's easy to be deceived by your own ideas. Like climate apocalypse, there's nothing in Scripture that would suggest that. But, because it's something that people are talking about these days, it's something that I can't say climate wouldn't play a role in what happens before the end, but also there's just no biblical basis for saying that global warming is going to play any kind of a role here. And so it's easy to read our own fears about our own times and our own imminent futures, or what people are saying about the future, as if it were supported biblically. And that's a real danger when you're trying to get a handle on Bible prophecy, because there is a long, long track record of people making predictions that the end of the world is just around the corner, that it's going to occur within a few years, within our own lifetimes. There have been people like that all the way down through the centuries, and so far, every single one of them has been wrong.
Yes.
And what they would do is they would look to justify that speculation. They would look to events occurring in their own time and speculate that, this must be something that's connected with biblical prophecy, even if there was little or no basis for that in the text of the Bible. So I try to avoid looking at specific trends today and focus more on what the biblical text would suggest. And there are a few things that are identified in the biblical text as plausible signs for the end. One of them is a massive apostasy from the faith. And by apostasy, I don't mean people getting wrong ideas about the faith. That's just heresy, and that's been around in every age. I also don't mean apostasy in a particular location. There have been apostasies in different locations before, like when Muslim forces conquered North Africa, which had previously been dominantly Christian, and there was a mass apostasy there. So if I see, say, an apostasy happening in a particular part of the world today, that's not automatically a sign of the end. But if we saw a global apostasy of people saying, I'm not Christian anymore, just severing all ties with the Christian faith, that could be a sign that the end is nearer than farther away. And right now, I don't see that, because even though there is a weakening of the faith in certain parts of the world, like in Europe and here in America, that's not the case in other parts of the world. In fact, the gospel is making great strides in other places, including Africa and East Asia. And so we're not seeing a global apostasy. Right now, half of the global population identifies as Christian. And that's just not an apostasy when half of everybody who's alive is Christian. Another sign that is talked about, and this is alluded to also in the Catechism of the Catholic Church, but it's also something St. Paul discusses in the book of Romans, is apparently there's going to be a notable conversion of non-Christian Jewish people to the Christian faith. Exactly what the shape of that will be, whether it'll be all Jews or just most non-Christian Jews, there's going to be some kind of notable conversion of the Jewish people to the Christian faith prior to the second coming. And while there has been some conversion as in every age, there have been conversions from non-Christian Judaism to Christianity. There has been some effort in that regard in, the 20th century, but that mass conversion that St. Paul seems to indicate will happen, that hasn't taken place yet. If you look at the Catechism, one of the things it talks about, and look around paragraph 676 for this information in the Catechism. I don't know why they didn't just adjust it by 10 and make it 666. But if you look around paragraph 676, you'll see a discussion of the Antichrist and associated events. And it appears that there will be a great persecution of the church, which is no doubt related to the apostasy. In one way or another. It also alludes to making a deal with falsehood for the sake of peace. So there may be, whether that's military peace or social peace or something, who knows. But I would point you to the Catechism of the Catholic Church for a look at the Church's understanding of this matter for more information.
Anonymous, I also will recommend to you a book that Catholic Answers Press came out with a couple of years ago, and you can get it at shop.catholic.com, and it's called What Jesus Really Said About the End of the World, and it picks up some of these things that it's by David Curry that Jimmy was talking about, including as he began the answer to his question by saying, so far everybody's gotten it wrong. So What Jesus Really Said About the End of the World, David Curry, shop.catholic.com.
Also, I've got a 20 Answers End Times booklet coming out later this year, and there's already out a 20 Answers Biblical Prophecy booklet that I wrote that's already available.
Oh, good. My friends, how would you like to be able to answer questions about the Catholic faith and the Bible as well as Jimmy Akin? The good news is that you can, but it's going to take some work. I'm looking at this copy that Carrie gave us. You can. Well, I know you it's a lifetime of study. With hard work and the right tools, you can learn Catholic apologetics. And Catholic Answers wants to help, which is why we created the School of Apologetics that Jimmy and I were talking about at the top of the hour. So right now, you can get the first course in Catholic Answers School of Apologetics. Got to start somewhere. It's called Beginning Apologetics, and we are offering it at the special introductory price of $50 off. That's right. We've priced the introductory module at the super low price to get you started, and we know that you are going to love it. One student said, Jimmy does a great job kicking off the Catholic Answers School of Apologetics with the Beginning Apologetics course. I found it well organized and highly informative. I can't wait for the next offering. This course was a pleasure. Jimmy presented the material in a logical way, learned so much, and highly recommend this great course. My friends, great summer activity. Here it is. Visit schoolofapologetics.com to take advantage of this great deal. Right back after this.
Call now. Catholic Answers Live.
St. John Paul II stated that, for the disciple of Christ, evangelization is a duty, an obligation of love, and the Catechism of the Catholic Church states that evangelization is necessary for salvation.
So we know we're called, but how do we do it?
St. Paul Street Evangelization can help. To learn more, contact us at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
I firmly believe that prayer is communication with God. And if we know that God is a loving Father, why wouldn't we want to talk to God? The reality is we've got to talk to our family, we've got to talk to our friends, and if God is real, and God is definitely real, He wants to hear about our day. He also wants to know how we're doing and what our needs are. Prayer is communication with God.
Eight 318-7884, 888-318-7884, 888-31-TRUTH. My name is Chris Check. I am sitting in for Cy Kellett, my guest, at Jimmy Akin. All the phones are full, but keep trying. Open forum, Catholic Answers Live. We will answer any questions about the Catholic faith. Gabriel, 9 years old, calling from the great city of Houston in the great Lone Star State of Texas. Gabriel, welcome to Catholic Answers Live.
Thank you.
What's your question, my young friend?
When you see an angel, how do you know if it's real?
Wow.
Okay. The basic way, and it's a good to ask because sometimes people imagine things, or sometimes they dream things, or sometimes if they're sick, they may even hallucinate things, which is kind of like dreaming something even though you're not asleep. And so you need to ask. And the way to do that is to, if you see an angel or what you think may be an angel, ask the angel to do something that only an angel could do. You want to be polite and respectful because angels are powerful, but ask the angel if he can do something that only an angel could do, like perform a miracle or predict the future or something like that. And it should be something that no human could fake and that there would be no arguing about it. Like, for example, suppose someone put on angel wings, like a costume, and appeared to you and said, "Hi, I'm an angel." And you say, "Okay, well then predict the future." And they say, "Oh, the sun's going to come up tomorrow." Well, humans can predict that the sun is going to come up tomorrow. It needs to be something that you can't just predict. Or if you said, do something only an angel could do, well, maybe the person's a stage magician and says, "Oh, well, I'll make a rabbit come out of my hat." And he does. Well, stage magicians can do that. So it needs to be something that a human simply couldn't do. Also, anytime you're in communication with someone you think may be an angel, whether they are or aren't, you should tell your parents about it. And if your parents, once your parents are involved, they may also want to talk to a priest who, may bring in an expert in discerning such matters. But it's important that you let people know about this and you let them know what's going on, and then they can use the wisdom that God has given them to help guide you through the situation.
How about that, Gabriel? Does that help you out?
Yes.
Good. Gabriel, you're 9 years old. You've made your first communion?
Yes.
Good. Well, pray for Catholic Answers, all right? Every day, all right?
Okay. I'm interested in knowing, Gabriel, do you think you've seen an angel possibly?
No.
All right.
No. Okay. Well, it's good to be aware of what to do if you ever do.
And be on the lookout. Yeah, you never know. Great. Thank you very much, Gabriel. So, Jimmy, one of those things would not be, for example, a test for an angel, conjugating, a third conjugation, a regular Latin verb or something like that. Probably a human could do that.
Anyone who has taken a Latin class could do that.
I think so, yeah. Let's go to Fabian, also in the Lone Star State, from New Braunfels, listening on the Catholic Answers app. Fabian, thanks for using the Catholic Answers app, and welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me. So, I had a Protestant friend say that purgatory is not necessary because once the body leaves the soul no longer has bodily wants and therefore will no longer be inclined to turn away from God. I believe I responded to him adequately, but I was wondering if I could get your input. Also, I believe this belief is tied to a heretical group that believed that the body was inherently evil and the soul was inherently good. What was this heretical group?
Oh, well, there have been a variety of groups who have said things like that down through the centuries. Various forms of the heresy known as Gnosticism have claimed that the body was evil. They're probably the most famous for it, though there have been other groups as well.
Jimmy, I talk about the Cathars in my talk on the Inquisition.
I was going to mention the Cathars are kind of a medieval equivalent or possibly even offshoot of earlier Gnosticism. Also Manichaeans, the sect that St. Augustine was part of before he was a Christian. So there have been a variety of people who've claimed that. In terms of how I would respond, well, it's true that according to the classical thought on this subject, there are three sources of sin: the world, the flesh, and the devil. And so the flesh, even though that's understood really to mean human nature, is one of those things. But, and it's also true that we do have bodily temptations that are disordered, that can, for example, make you want to eat too much or engage in intimate behavior with people you have no right to do that with, or various other things that are, bodily in origin. It's clearly not the case that sin is just rooted in our bodies. And a really good example of that is the devil, because the devil does not have a body, and his angels do not have bodies, at least not natively. And so when they fell away from God, that shows that even purely spiritual beings that don't have bodies are capable of being tempted to turn their backs on God and sin. Now, that means that just because we don't have a body at the point of our death doesn't mean that we are automatically free of temptation. We will, by God's grace, be instantaneously freed from sin if we die in God's friendship. We're not going to be sinning, but there's been damage to our spirits as a result of original sin and the kind of lives we've led and so forth. And it may take time to clean that up. And that's one thing that purgatory is thought to do. Purgatory is simply the final stage of our sanctification that makes us perfectly holy and able to experience the full glory of heaven. So that could take time. The church doesn't really have a teaching about this. And as a result of that, it also could happen instantaneously. It could happen in the twinkling of an eye, to use a biblical phrase. And so that's actually something that not Saint yet, but that Pope Benedict XVI talks about in his encyclical on Christian hope, Spe Salvi. If you look up his teaching on purgatory in Spe Salvi, one of the points he makes is that purgatory can't be measured in time the way we experience it. It's more of an existential event or something that happens to us. It's an experience that is real, but is one that you can't simply measure in earthly time because we really don't know how time works in the afterlife. And so consequently, your friend's point doesn't really go to the issue. He seems to be assuming that the minute you lose your body, everything's going to be fine. Well, and it may be true that the minute you lose your body, everything's going to be fine. But if it's fine, it's because God has made it fine. It's because God has purified you, however long or short that takes, whether it's years or whether it's in the twinkling of an eye. It's because of God's work in your soul that you're sanctified and you're made holy. And so regardless of whether purgatory is long or short, it's necessary. If you're not perfectly pure at the moment you die, and you are perfectly pure at the moment you're in heaven, then it's clear between death and heaven must come a purification. Whether it takes a significant amount of time or not is up to God.
Fabian, our colleague Carlo Broussard right now is at work on a book about purgatory that will be out this fall, so watch for that. 888-318-7884, 888-31-TRUTH. Let's go to Giovanni in Rhode Island. Did I get the accent there correct? On the right syllable?
Oh, you got it. Oh, yeah, absolutely. That's something I never heard before, but good job. So my question is the Old Testament. It says, it seems to be a repetitive theme that God hardens the hearts of the enemies of Israel. If he can harden hearts, right, why can't he just soften them? And if he does harden hearts, how does he do it? Directly or indirectly? That's something I've been struggling with reading the Old Testament.
Giovanni, we're coming up against
Yeah.
the clock. We'll see if we can. If not, we'll pick it up after the break.
So, to at least get a start on the answer, we have to understand the way that Old Testament's authors write. They have a worldview where there are all kinds of competing people who believe in competing gods. And so one of the things they do is they really stress the idea that the true God is in control, that he is almighty, that he is not like the gods of the nations. And so they use a kind of literary form of speech called hyperbole, which is exaggeration to make a point. And we'll pick up that point on the other side of the break.
888-318-7884. I'm Chris Check, president of Catholic Answers, sitting in for Cy Kellett. My guest is Jimmy Akin. It's open forum, questions about the Catholic faith. Right back after this.
Hello, this is Archbishop Alexander Sample of the Archdiocese of Portland in Oregon. Keep that dial right here on Catholic Answers Live.
Hi, this is Cy. I'm really proud of the 2 episodes of Catholic Answers Focus that we have for you this week. And if you haven't yet become a subscriber to our free podcast, this is definitely the week you should start. Monday, we've got an interview with Father Hugh Barber about the relationship between your soul and the Blessed Trinity. How is it that the triune God relates to your soul? Talk about news you can use. And Wednesday, we tackle Christopher Columbus with the world's leading Columbus scholar, Dr. Carol Delaney. Is it time to give up on Columbus? In the light of modern scholarship, should we be taking down Columbus statues and murals? Prepare to be surprised by the truth of the man. Subscribe to Catholic Answers Focus wherever you get your podcasts, or listen anytime at CatholicAnswersFocus.com.
Catholic Answers Live.
Many Catholics ignore the Bible. They say they have the church instead. But we should embrace sacred scripture, not just as the revealed word of God, but as a Catholic work, intimately connected with the church from the earliest centuries. In The Bible is a Catholic Book, apologist Jimmy Akin shows how the Bible cannot exist apart from the church, in its origins, in the truths it contains, in its careful preservation over the centuries. Scripture is inseparable from the Catholic faith. This is fitting, since both come from God for our salvation. If you're a Catholic who sometimes gets intimidated by the Bible is a Catholic Book will help you better understand and take pride in this gift that God gave the world through the Church. After all, Catholics are the original Bible Christians. Order your copy of The Bible is a Catholic Book today by calling 1-844-239-4952, visiting shop.catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Tomorrow on More to Life, all shook up.
Feeling anxious? Shaken up? We're going to help you find your peace.
That's tomorrow on More to Life. Now, back to Catholic Answers.
Catholic Answers Live. Chris Check sitting in for Cy Kellett. The number to call, 888-318-7884. Jimmy, before the break, you were helping Giovanni with a question about what it means when we read that God hardens people's hearts in the Old Testament.
Yeah, so the biblical authors they really want to stress that God is in control and that nothing would happen if God didn't at least allow it. But to make that point, they frequently use a form of speech called hyperbole. Hyperbole is exaggeration to make a point. It's like if someone's done something nice for me and I'm grateful and I say, "Oh, thanks a million." Well, that's hyperbole. I'm not envisioning literally thanking the person a million times, but I'm making the point with this exaggeration. And similarly, when Jesus says, in order to avoid sin, cut off your hand or pluck out your eye, that's exaggeration to make a point. It's hyperbole. He means do whatever you need to do to deal with sin, but he doesn't envision literally plucking out your eye or literally cutting off your hand, because really the root of sin is in your heart, and simply cutting off your hand would not deal with the root of sin. You'd still have temptation. You'd still be able to sin. His point is do what you need to do to deal with it. So when we look at the way God is discussed in the Old Testament, especially, we find the biblical authors using hyperbole to emphasize God's control over world events. And this results in a form of speech where they will at times attribute things directly to God. For example, if you read the historical books of the Old Testament and you compare what's written in the books of Samuel versus what's written in the books of Chronicles, you look at the account of David taking a census of Israel, which is something he was not supposed to do in that circumstance. And in one book, it'll say God caused David to take the census. But in another book, it'll say the devil caused David to take the census. And since we know the census is sinful, that David shouldn't have done it, it's the lack that the devil stirred up David to take the census. And when it says God did it, what it means, it's exaggeration to make a point that God is ultimately in control. It means God allowed the devil to stir up David. But we know that it doesn't mean God himself really caused David to sin, because that would make God the author of sin, and that's inconsistent with God's holiness. So God, as the book of James says, does not himself tempt anybody to sin. He may allow temptations to come, but he himself doesn't cause anybody to sin. He doesn't tempt anybody to sin. He merely at most allows that to happen. And so that understanding informs the way we need to look at passages where it talks about God hardening people's hearts, like Pharaoh's heart. It's famous in Exodus. God tells Moses, I'm going to harden Pharaoh's heart, so he's going to resist the Exodus, but then in the end, he will let Israel go. One of the things that's been pointed out about that incident is that actually the text says that Pharaoh hardened his heart first, and only later did God harden it. And so that may be, and various interpreters have understood it to be, a sign of God simply allowing Pharaoh to go on the sinful course he wanted to go on. Pharaoh hardened his heart, and then God let him do that, and it becomes spoken of as if God had hardened his heart. But really, that's exaggeration to mean that God let Pharaoh continue in his hardened, sinful way. In terms of how God softens hearts, he once again does it in a way that doesn't violate free will. He doesn't override our free will and force us to do good things, but what he does do is give us graces that make it easier to choose to do the right thing. And that's what it means when the Bible talks about God softening our hearts. He's giving us grace to make it easier to do the right thing. And then the reverse of that, hardening people's hearts, is simply not giving them that grace. So it's harder for them to do the right thing, or not as easy as if he had given them special grace. Why would he not give his grace in some circumstances, and thus so-called harden people's hearts? Well, it's partly a mystery. It's part of the problem of evil. But as in the case of Pharaoh, if someone just repeatedly abuses their free will by choosing evil, God may say, okay, well, I've been trying to help this person and they're clearly not responding, so I'm not going to go out of my way to give them extra help. If they're going to turn around, it's going to be a little more difficult for them to turn around, but they can do it because I've given them free will and I'm letting them do it. But if they persist in evil, they may not get all the extra help that they would otherwise get if they consistently use their free will towards good.
Jimmy, very thorough answer. Giovanni, thanks so much for the question. Let's go to Alistair in Bangalore, India, calling all the way from Bangalore. Alistair, welcome to Catholic Answers Live.
Hi. Jimmy, will the church identify the Antichrist when he comes?
Well, it would be helpful. It'd be really helpful to have the Pope come out and say so-and-so is the Antichrist. That would probably cause a harsh crackdown. During World War II, we had the most Antichrist-like figure, or one of the most Antichrist-like figures of recent memory, Adolf Hitler, and Pope Pius XII really had to wrestle with how much public pushback he could give, lest it cause greater reprisals. Because even with the level of criticism of what Hitler's Jewish policies were that he was able to engage in publicly, this is also Pius XI, if he spoke out against what Hitler was doing to Jewish people, more Jews got arrested and deported. And so if at the end the Pope were to say so-and-so is the Antichrist, you could expect that would intensify persecution of the church. Having said that, I don't know whether this will happen. The church does not have a teaching that at the end the Pope will identify the Antichrist. So I think that's a matter of speculation at this point.
How's that, Alistair?
Okay. Yeah, okay, thank you. Yeah.
Good. Jimmy, I think of that moment in the 16th century when Pius V excommunicated Queen Elizabeth, and then, very quickly thereafter, there were a lot of English martyrs.
Yeah.
Let's go to Anonymous, listening on the Catholic Answers Live app. Thanks for using our app, Anonymous, and welcome to Catholic Answers Live. Anonymous, are you there?
Hey guys, thanks for taking.
Good.
Yeah, I'm here. Thanks for taking my call. So I want to know if my wife has a reasonable chance at heaven. And let me just give you some background. I'm Catholic. Our kids are Catholic, and she's not Christian. She's not baptized as a Christian, but she comes to churches every Sunday. And so I've heard Jimmy in the past say that people ignorant of Christ, won't be penalized necessarily. I'm not saying in the most eloquent way. And so my concern is that because she's listening to the gospel every Sunday with us, is that some kind of tacit rejection of Christ, and is that going to affect her soul?
That's a great
question. One added twist to this is kind of ironic, is that my family is from India. My family actually got converted by St. Thomas in the 50 ADs. My wife is Caucasian, and her mother was baptized as a Christian, but got, I'll say, sucked into Indian guru. So it's just kind of ironic, if nothing else.
Wonderful question.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for asking. There's no way to judge an individual's heart, so I can't say one way or another. Being exposed to the Christian message is something that can produce the responsibility of, okay, you need to become a Christian, but it's not merely hearing the message. In order to oblige a person to believe something, it needs to be more than just hearing the message itself. To illustrate that, if, let's say, you're living on a desert island and a Christian washes up on the shore and he's a madman, and he preaches the gospel to you, and he says Jesus is the Son of God, and pigs live in trees, and snow is blazing hot. Well, he's told you the truth. Jesus is the Son of God, but he's surrounded it with so much nonsense that it doesn't create, he hasn't given you evidence to believe that Jesus is the Son of God, and he's surrounded it with nonsense that would also not create an obligation to believe anything he says. So that's an extreme example, but the same thing applies in principle in every situation. It's not merely hearing the message. One also needs to see enough evidence of one form or another to oblige one to accept the message. And if through no fault of one's own, one hasn't accepted the message, then God will understand that, and he will only hold a person accountable for the amount of light and grace that they had in their lives, and did they live up to that. In terms of going beyond the principles into probabilities, which is what you asked about, does your wife have a reasonable chance? That's something that there are different opinions on. In his encyclical Spes Salvi, Pope Benedict suggests that we may hope, and he doesn't put it as more than a hope, but he says we may hope that today there is a fundamental core of goodness in most people so that they don't end up being lost and going to hell. So he hopes that most people will be saved, but he doesn't know that most people will be saved. On the other hand, other people have estimated the odds differently. And so my suggestion is let's try to be as sure as we can. You love your wife. Let's see if we can give her the best odds of salvation possible, and do your best when it's reasonable and in the best way, knowing who she is and her background. See if there's a way to say, honey, I really appreciate you coming to Mass with me, and maybe you want to consider becoming a Christian. Maybe you want to consider joining the church, and I'd be happy to help you look at that, or work through any issues or questions that you might have. If you want to see evidence, there's this great organization called Catholic Answers that can hook you up with evidence, or even just saying, hey, honey, let's listen to Catholic Answers Live together. Over time, that could have an effect. So in whatever way is prudent, given your circumstances, I would say do what you can to help your wife embrace the fullness of the Christian faith. That's something that will result in her being happier long term, because the Christian faith brings joy, and don't lose hope, whatever the case.
Anonymous, do you have the book by our colleague Trent Horn, Why We're Catholic?
Yeah, I do, and we had a little thing over Christmas where I said, I'll give you a book to read, you give me a book to read, and she wouldn't get past the first couple pages.
Right, sure.
Before we got married, she said, oh, do you want me to get baptized? And I said, you need to want to get baptized. You'll get baptized just because I tell you to.
Sure.
And, so it's that. So I feel like a failure, but I appreciate everything Jimmy said, and I just continue to pray to God that she'll come into the church, but she's kind of...
Do not feel like a failure, because everybody has free will. Your wife, God gave your wife free will. God respects that. And so you shouldn't take that burden on yourself and say, oh, I failed here. You just want to do what you can to be helpful and loving.
And you have the supernatural gift of hope, and God's grace is pretty extraordinary. And you have the prayers of the Catholic Answer staff for you, Anonymous. Thanks very much for calling. Let's go to Emil in Pennsylvania, watching on Facebook. Welcome to Catholic Answers Live.
Hello, hey, big fan.
Did we lose you, Emil?
Yeah.
Yeah. Can we start again?
Yeah, sure. Hello?
Go ahead.
You're on the air, Emil. What's your question?
Sorry. My bad, sorry. Anyway, hi. I just had one little question. In regards to, I've been a Catholic for about 2 years, so I'm a convert from Protestant. My family's Protestant, but I'm a convert, and I've been a Catholic for about 2 years. And I was the thing about my church is my priest, I've noticed, is very right wing, very conservative. And me personally, I don't really have a political affiliation. I usually don't really bother with politics. I was raised in a mostly left wing family, and we were always taught that we're right and they're wrong, and he's over here telling me the opposite, and it's kind of like I try not to get. I told him I'm not a political person, but he just keeps pushing it and pushing it. And he told me, and he basically said, "Well, if you're Catholic, you gotta agree with this party. You can't listen to the left. You can't listen to the left because they're liars. They hate everything we stand for and such and such." Me personally, I don't think that way. I mean, I take bits and pieces from both sides to see what I agree with and disagree with, and what stands against my moral as a Christian. But I feel like he's trying to push me all the way to the right. How do I deal with that?
Well, so I guess the first thing to say is there are a lot of different people in the Catholic Church. They have a lot of different opinions. Like James Joyce, the famous Irish novelist, described the Catholic Church by saying, well, here comes everybody. And so you'll find some Catholic priests who are very conservative in their politics. You'll find some Catholic priests who are very liberal in their politics. The same thing happens all over the political spectrum, because the church is a global institution. It's very big. It's got more than 1 billion members, and they have lots of different opinions in different parts of the world. So you happen to be encountering someone who's coming from a different place politically than you are. In terms of how to handle that, I would say, well, the church does not have an official party that one needs to support. In fact, the church is cautious about parties and tribalism. And frankly, because human beings are fallen, people in every party end up doing things they shouldn't, including lying. And that's just a truth of human nature. You put not your trust in princes, as Chris likes to say, quoting the Old Testament. If you rely on political leaders like princes, they will let you down eventually. And so what the church has instead of a party is principles. It has basic moral principles and then certain applications to social situations that flow from those. And rather than endorsing a party, it endorses principles. And it's principally, not to put a pun on it, but it's principally up to the individual to learn those principles and to discern them, and then to apply them to the situation in which you find yourself in your place in time and history in the world. And that does, at times, mean a kind of eclecticism, where you need to listen seriously to what people from a wide variety of different perspectives have to say and analyze them critically, and then do your best to synthesize them in terms of concrete decisions like who to vote for or what measures to support and oppose. And that's something that involves thought. It doesn't involve just taking a party line, because the princes in charge of the party will make mistakes. One of the things we have at Catholic Answers that may be of service to you is a book, if you're watching online, that Chris Check happens to be holding at the moment, called 20 Answers, Catholic Social Teaching. It's by Mark Brumley, the president of Ignatius Press. He's a very intelligent, very thoughtful, and very orthodox thinker, and I would suggest getting a copy of that, maybe getting an extra copy and sharing it with your priest. But always in these kind of situations, even if your priest is interested in talking to you about this, that doesn't mean you have to engage in that conversation. If you've had enough of this discussion, you can say, Father, I appreciate your position. I'm thinking this through on my own, and I'll take into account what you had to say, but let's talk about something else.
My friends, imagine you are there in a conversation with your Protestant brother, and he tells you the Catholic Church added books to the Bible. What do you say? Well, Catholic Answers can help, and at no cost to you. Visit shop.catholic.com right now. Click on the banner at the bottom of the page to download our new free ebook, Did the Church Add Books to the Bible? At shop.catholic.com. Right back after this.
Stay with us for more Catholic Answers Live.
Homeschool Connections, an online provider of courses for your Catholic homeschool, is a sponsor of Catholic Answers Live. Homeschool Connections website is homeschoolconnections.com.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Divine Intimacy Radio.
The greatest joy in my life is helping others to come to know Christ more fully. And there's no better light on this path, the path to deep union with God, than the wisdom of the saints. Talking about this daily on EWTN Radio is one of the great joys of my life.
Divine Intimacy Radio, Sunday, 6:30 a.m., 1:30 p.m., and 11 p.m. Eastern on EWTN Radio.
Catholic Answers Live. Chris Check sitting in for Cy Kellett. About, less than 10 minutes in this first hour remaining with Jimmy Akin. But the good news is, if we don't get to you in the first hour, we will get to you in the second hour. A whole nother hour, as they would say in some parts of the country.
I like the infix there.
Yeah, I kind of did that in your honor, Jimmy. Yeah.
Thank you.
A whole nother hour coming up after this one of Open Forum. Can we go to David all the way in Sydney, Australia? David, I was in your country last fall. Beautiful place. Welcome to Catholic Answers Live.
Hi, how are you? Good?
Yeah. What can we tell you?
Hello? Oh, yeah. I just have a question about the succession of Peter, St. Peter.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I've done a bit of research and I looked into the missionary and the journey of St. Peter. He went to Antioch and he ordained, I think it was Evodius or Ignatius of Antioch to take care of the country, or Antioch and stuff. And then he went to Rome and he done the same thing to St. Linus and stuff. I just wanted to see, I mean, what's the difference between the successes of Antioch and Rome? I mean, why do Catholics look at Rome instead of Antioch if St. Peter done the same thing in both places?
Yeah, great question.
Well, the basic reason is because of a choice that Peter made. Now, Peter initially was in Jerusalem, and that's where Jesus wanted him to begin his ministry after the resurrection. But he then moved on to Antioch, which was a major city, for people who are aware, it's a major city in Syria. And because it was such a big city, it was a logical place for Christians to flee in time of persecution and to preach the gospel once they were there. And so that's what happened. There was a persecution in Jerusalem. A lot of Christians fled. Some of them came to Antioch. And because it was a major city and a major trading hub, it was a great place to start evangelizing from. And so that's where actually the first Gentile converts, or some of the first Gentile converts, ended up being made. And it was natural, because it became a significant Christian center, for St. Peter to go there after he himself left Jerusalem because of persecution. But he chose not to stay there. As many benefits as Antioch offered as a city with some Christians who were there, and as a major trading hub, and as a good point of evangelization, he realized there was an even better one: the capital of the empire, Rome. And so he went to Rome. Rome, they have that saying, all roads lead to Rome. Well, in the ancient world, that was not too far from being true. You had people from all over the known world traveling to and from Rome via the Roman system of highway. So that made Rome, as the capital, an even better place to go and evangelize. And there was already a Christian community there. That there had been some Romans in Jerusalem on Pentecost, and they brought their new faith home with them. So there was already a Christian base there. So he went to Rome, he connected with the Christian community in Rome, and then he made that the new site of his ministry to help bring the gospel throughout the Roman world. And so Rome was where he went definitively. It's where he ended his life, because it was the better evangelization hub. And so that's why he left his definitive successor in Rome rather than in Jerusalem or in Antioch.
How is that, David?
It's a satisfying answer, but it's just that I'm still wrapping my head around. I mean, like, I've spoken to so many people about it, and the answers I get is that, his bones are there. That means that's where the successor is. That's where the supremacy and the primacy should stay, not in Antioch. So, I don't know if that's right. Is that a proper answer or response you can give to?
His bones being there is true, but that's more of an evidence that he was there and he ended his life there. The fact that he ended his life there and that he chose this place to go to over other places, he went here to conduct the definitive stage of his ministry, and that's where you would expect him to leave his definitive successor, and that's a perfectly reasonable thing to explain to our non-Catholic friends.
All right, David?
Awesome. Thanks so much.
888-318-7884. Gene in Houston, Texas. Let's see if we can get you before we close the hour. Gene, are you there? Gene in Houston, Texas. Wait a minute.
Can you hear me?
Gene, go right ahead. You're running out of time.
Great. Okay, just a quick question. Okay, I have an old Bible that I was either given or I bought many, many years ago. I don't even like the translation much, but the pages are kind of falling out. What do I do with it? I don't want to throw it away. I don't, what's the best thing to do with it?
Has this Bible ever been blessed?
I don't know that.
Okay. Even in the case of blessed objects, there are no official rules for how to dispose of them. For blessed objects, it's customary to either burn or bury them, depending on what the nature of the object. So given it's made of paper, burning would be an option. However, in the case of, that's only a custom, it's not a requirement. And in the case of non-blessed objects, there are no special customs at all.
Catholic Answers Live, 888-318-7884. We're going to take a short break, and we'll be back with the second hour of Jimmy Akin Open Forum Catholic Answers Live right back after this. 888-318-7884. The show is Catholic Answers Live. My name is Christopher Check. I am president at Catholic Answers. I'm sitting in for Cy Kellett, the usual host of Catholic Answers Live, who's getting a little vacation day today. He will be back in this chair tomorrow, and I thank Cy for letting me get away from my desk and get behind the microphone, and for 2 hours of education with Jimmy Akin. I always come away from these hours, Jimmy, with more knowledge than I started.
Cool.
Yeah, and it's all because of you, and Marie, the call screener, and Nick Chamberlain, the engineer, and Zach, the videographer, video guy.
Videographer works.
Okay, right. Camera guy. Yeah, whatever. All right, my friends, Catholic Answers Live. It's open forum. Any questions about the Catholic faith? We've already got quite a few people in the queue, so why don't we just go straight to questions, Jimmy?
Okay.
All right, Alex in Vancouver. Welcome to Catholic Answers Live.
Hi, I actually called yesterday too. And so thank Jimmy for his answer.
No problem. How can I help you today?
So I just have a question. When I read the Bible, I have trouble understanding some of the stuff, and just if you could give some tips on like how to actually understand and like get knowledge out of it.
Okay. Well, in general terms, there are a number of things that you can use. Now, sometimes people have trouble understanding what's in the Bible because they're using a translation that may be older and that uses old-fashioned words that are unfamiliar. And so getting a newer translation is one thing that can help. Or in some newer translations, some of them are easier to read than others. And so getting one that's easier to read could also be a help. Or even just getting a second translation so that when you read a passage in one Bible and it's not clear, look up the same passage in a different translation, and having two perspectives may help you get a better sense of what's happening. So those are some things you can do just with Bibles themselves. Also, you might consider getting what's called a study Bible. A study Bible is a Bible that not only has the books of the Bible in it, it also has notes and introductions to help explain things that are in the text of the Bible itself. In addition to study Bibles, now if there's a plain old unfamiliar word, you can always go to the Google machine and say definition and then the word that's confusing and look it up and find out what its meaning is. But that's kind of on the level of words. Sometimes you might want to consult what's known as a Bible dictionary. Bible dictionaries and similar longer works called Bible encyclopedias will have entries on various words that are in the Bible and concepts and places and people that are in the Bible, and you can look them up and get more background information on them. And then there's what's called a commentary. A commentary is a book or set of books that goes through the Bible or part of the Bible and gives an explanation of what the author thinks it means. So I use commentaries all the time. When I was using them earlier today. I was looking up a few passages in the Bible, and I immediately opened some commentaries and said, okay, what have other people thought that these passages mean? And so commentaries can be very helpful. They come in different levels. Some commentaries are very basic. Some are very scholarly. If you're just new to Bible study, starting with basic commentaries would be of help. There are a lot of online resources, a lot of online commentaries that could be of assistance. Places like Bible.org have commentaries that are available for you to look at online for free. They're not always Catholic. In fact, frequently they're not, but they contain basic information that could be helpful about different passages. Also, something you might want to do is get a book on how to study the Bible. Now, I've wanted for a while to write a book like that, and I hope to in the future, but there are a lot of books like that are already available. And one of the words you might want to look for is kind of a fancy word, but it's the word exegesis. It's spelled EXEGESIS, exegesis. Another an exegesis is an interpretation. It's just a fancy word for interpretation. And there are various books on Bible exegesis. So you might search on that on Amazon and look at some books and see if any of them are appealing to you. Another kind of fancy word that you'll sometimes run across is hermeneutics. Hermeneutics is spelled HERMENEUTICS. And hermeneutics is just a fancy word for the study of the principles that you use to interpret something. So they're the principles of interpretation. And if you get a book on exegesis or a book on hermeneutics, it will help you, at least biblical exegesis or biblical hermeneutics, it'll help give you principles that you can use when reading different passages of the Bible. And of course, if there's a particular passage that you're having difficulty understanding, you're always welcome to call in here on Catholic Answers Live and let me or one of the other apologists take a swing at it and see if we can clarify that passage for you.
A lot of good advice there, Alex. Does that get you on your way?
Yeah, thank you so much.
Great. Call back anytime. Can we go to Melissa, right up the 5 from us, listening in Orange County, California, watching on YouTube Live. Melissa, welcome to Catholic Answers Live.
Hello. I had a question as far as the status of independent Catholic churches that are not under the diocese. Because there was a quote-unquote Catholic church that I used to attend, but it wasn't under the Diocese of Orange County. So is that like, I guess, more like a Protestant church, or is it not Catholic?
So to know a little bit more, because it depends on the specific group that's involved. Was this so-called independent Catholic church that you went to, was it part of any larger organization?
No, it wasn't SSPX or FSSP, but they did adhere to the Latin Mass and basically pre-Vatican II tradition.
Mm-hmm. Okay, but they were not part of a larger organization. In that case, the problem is this. Without knowing anything further about it, my assumption is that this church is what's known as a schismatic church. A schismatic church is, or a person who is schismatic is a person who is not in union with the Bishop of Rome or with other people who are in union with him. And if you have a person who is operating without the permission of their bishop and without the permission of the local bishop and is otherwise unaffiliated with an organization like the Priestly Fraternity of St. Peter, or even the SSPX, they are in communion. They're not currently in a state of schism. Or a personal prelature like Opus Dei, if they're not affiliated with another organization that is in union with the church and they're not under the authority of the local bishop, then the assumption would be that they're a schismatic group that's not actually Catholic. They may imitate things that Catholics do, but they've lost an essential part of the Catholic faith, which is union with the Pope and the others who are in communion with him.
How's that, Melissa? Does that
So would their
go ahead?
Would their sacraments like communion count or not count then?
They would be, assuming they had valid holy orders and they were using the right matter and the right words and had the right intention, yes, that sacrament would be valid. Not all of their sacraments would be, though, necessarily. There would be a question, for example, about marriages that were performed in that church, and also confessions that were heard in that church, because a priest needs special faculties in order to be able to serve at marriages and to hear confessions. And so there would be questions about those, but with other sacraments like baptism, that would, or the Eucharist, those would be valid, but it wouldn't ordinarily be lawful for a Catholic to receive those sacraments in that church. Catholics, under ordinary circumstances, are obliged to receive sacraments in the Catholic Church, not in churches that are in separation from it.
Melissa, does that give some clarity to the situation for you?
Yes.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. You're not so far away from us, so when the world starts spinning again, feel free to come down and we'll give you a tour of Catholic Answers. You can watch the show live from our studio here.
Thank you.
All right, take care. My friends, every day, the Friends of Catholic Answers let us know just how much they appreciate the work of our apostolate, and many say that Catholic Answers has brought them or their children back to the church after many years of being away. Others tell us stories of how our work deepened their own Catholicism or increased their confidence to discuss the faith at family gatherings. Put simply, our mission is to bring more people closer to Jesus Christ through the church that he founded 2,000 years ago and is still with us today, the Catholic Church. What we want to know is, how has the work of Catholic Answers impacted your life or the lives of those you care about the most? So please tell us. Send an email to mystory@catholic.com. That's mystory@catholic.com. And let us know how Catholic Answers has made a difference in your life right back after this.
Catholic Answers Live.
All people are called to communion with Christ in the church that he founded.
People really gravitate to David Anders and his concern for the callers.
Tom and I are both converts. We've walked that path, and we try to walk it with the listeners at whatever stage of the journey they're on.
It's EWTN's go-to source for non-Catholics, converts, and answer seekers.
Call to Communion TV with Dr. David Anders, Sunday afternoon, 4 Eastern on EWTN Television.
St. Paul's street evangelization isn't like other evangelism you might have seen on the streets. We don't yell, and we don't force anyone to pay attention to us. Instead, St. Paul's street evangelization is committed to presenting a positive, passionately Catholic presence to a world hungry for truth. For more information, or to start a chapter of your own, go to www.streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com. It's time to do our part.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects home buyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Eight 318-7884, 888-318-7884, 888-31-TRUTH. Jimmy and I were talking at the break here about a little bit of San Diego history and its association with the Jehovah's Witnesses, and the house that was built by the founder. And I think you said King David was going to live there, but some of the other prophets as well.
And other patriarchs were supposed to live there. It was built for them like back in the 1920s, and they never showed up.
No.
So it eventually was sold to other people.
And if I recall, the gentleman also bought a large limousine that he was going to drive the prophets around San Diego in.
Yep.
So
he had one of those newfangled cars. Yeah.
That's right.
Or automobiles, as they called them at the time.
Right. And alas, there's no photographic evidence of this. But a little...
there might be. I don't know. I've researched that.
Of the prophets riding around in the car.
Oh, well, no, there's not of that.
Yes. Speaking of prophets, let's go to Isaiah, watching on Catholic.com. Isaiah, welcome to Catholic Answers Live.
Greetings.
Hey.
Oh, okay. So my question was, I guess, asking for any particular suggestions for Catholic resources or saints, maybe books or consistent practices for alleviating symptoms or helping or addressing psychosis or schizophrenia.
Okay. Well, off the top of my head, now St. Luke is a patron saint of physicians, and so any medical condition, you can always pray to St. Luke. In terms of mental health issues specifically, there's a saint known as St. Dymphna, Dympphna, Dymphna, who is often asked for her intercession. So those are a couple of saints. In terms of practices, I'm sure there are various novenas and other prayers for people in situations like this. I don't know them myself, but they could be found by doing some Googling. In terms of non-religious practices, obviously getting competent assistance psychologically is something that is very important, and non-Catholic psychologists can be very helpful in that regard. At the same time, it could also help to have a Catholic perspective on some of the issues, depending on the nature of the symptoms that are presenting. And there are some Catholic counselors that you might be able, there are networks, in fact, that you might be able to refer this person to. One of them is Dr. Ray Guarendi, and his website is drray.com. So it's just DRRAY, 2 R's, Dr. DRRay, RAY.com. Also, there is a network of Catholic counselors run by another Catholic mental health expert named Dr. Greg Popcak, and that website is CatholicCounselors.com. So very simple, CatholicCounselors.com, and whoever this person is could make contact with Dr. Ray or with Catholic counselors and see what kind of mental health resources might be available either in their own area or via telemedicine, which is becoming much more available now.
Isaiah, I'll just add there's another network, CatholicPsychotherapy.org is also a reliable network of Catholic psychotherapists. Does that help?
Beautiful. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Let's go to James in Denver, Colorado, listening on 1060 AM. James, welcome to Catholic Answers Live.
Thank you. I wonder if the church has an official established procedure that registered members of the parish can use to compel their pastor to start or stop a non-sacramental action that the pastor wants to do, but the parishioners do not want him to do.
Okay. Without knowing more about this non-sacramental action, I may be only of limited assistance to you. In theory, what you can do is write the bishop and let the bishop handle it. There are various legal recourses that are available in some situations, but depending on what the pastor is wanting to do, the bishop or other ecclesiastical authorities may judge that it's within his rights.
James?
It's within his call to do that. So, hang on, Chris.
Sorry.
So, there are legal things that can be done. The first step would be write the bishop about it and see what comes of it. Having said that, writing the bishop should not be the first step. It may be the first step in escalating, but it's not the first step that should happen. One of the things that Jesus stresses in Matthew chapter 18 is how to deal with conflicts within the church. And the first step is not going over somebody's head, which is what going to the bishop amounts to. The first step is talk to the person privately. Talk to him privately, try to win him over, try to get him to see your perspective. If that doesn't work, then Jesus says, bring along a few other people and talk to him privately, try to win him over, bringing along a few extra people. If one doesn't work, may help him realize that there is more feeling about this subject and the need to address it than what he understood if just one person talks to him. But don't start by going over somebody's head. That always sets things off on a bad foot because nobody likes the first step being going over their head. You wouldn't like it if someone's first step in addressing a problem was to go to your boss. So that's what you should not do to other people. One of Jesus's teachings is follow the golden rule. do unto others as you would have them do unto you. So if you would want the chance to talk with someone in a friendly, open way first, rather than have someone go to your boss, do that for other people. This is a principle I have been very serious about in my life, and it's not always easy to go to talk to someone directly. Sometimes it can be tempting to say, well, let's just try to pull strings and get stuff done where I don't have to confront this person. But time and again, it's better to go to the person directly, talk to the person directly, and show the person the respect that you would want to have rather than immediately going over their head.
What do you think, James?
No, you're not really answering the question. I'm saying...
Well, I did.
No,
I did. I said step number one is talk to the bishop, and because most of the time that's going to be the bishop's call if there's something a pastor is doing that he shouldn't be doing. That's the logical next step. In terms of, are there legal procedures that can be used? Hypothetically, but you're going to need to talk to the bishop first. You're not going to be able to go to an ecclesiastical court that's unrelated to your diocese and get them to intervene in your parish.
All right, James?
All right, then it's up to us to use other means to compel the pastor to do what we want him to do.
Well, it may be your pastor's call. It may be within his legitimate authority. So I don't know what we're talking about here. I don't know what other means you're talking about. What are we talking about? Let's clarify that.
James, I think if you can explain the situation with a little more clarity, we could probably give you a better answer.
A discussion group that the pastor wants to control, and we want to let our membership control it.
And do you think, James, that simply speaking to the pastor and saying to him, listen, we're happy to have you in our discussion group, but you can't control it, you can participate, you think that will be unsuccessful?
With our pastor, he'd be polite. He'd say, I'll consider that, and then nothing would happen. No.
Well, so, James, I guess I have a few pieces of advice here. One of them is keep things in perspective. You've got a discussion group that's apparently, now I'm not entirely sure what you mean by control the group. In the call screening, you said he dominates the conversation. It would be within a pastor's legitimate authority to say, I want to make sure this control group, like this book club, doesn't go off into heretical territory. That would be legitimate for a pastor to exercise that kind of control. But if he's dominating the conversation to the annoyance of other people, then this amounts to an annoyance. And talking about using extrajudicial means to compel a pastor to not engage in something that's just an annoyance seems to me to lack some perspective. So I would say I understand the frustration, and I understand the difficulties that can be involved when someone is dominating a conversation, but getting this worked up about it is probably, and using language of compelling a priest to do something against his will is not going to help the matter. If you really want to address the matter in a constructive way, I would say relax, keep things in perspective, de-escalate this, ratchet down the temperature instead of ratcheting it up. Be friendly and winning and respectful, and that's your best chance for success. Worst case scenario, quit the book club, get on with your life, and maybe start a different book club outside the parish.
James, I think Jimmy's given some really good advice here. Thank you very much for your call. Let's see if we can get one more before the break. Let's go to Barbara in Crawley, Louisiana. Barbara, if we don't get the answer in, let's try to get the question in before the break.
Yeah, with the screener, I was a little bit different. But what my ultimate question is, what's going on with the folks who think that traditional, the old Latin tradition is best, what we should all do? It's like if you don't hold to the Latin tradition, then you're not in the inner circle. of Catholicism. You're a little bit less than okay. I just don't understand what's going on with that.
Okay. Well, one of the unfortunate, and we'll probably have to continue this on the other side of the break, but one of the unfortunate tendencies of fallen human nature is the tendency to divide into tribes and use different things as your tribal identity markers. And so after the Second Vatican Council, there was a change in the liturgy, and that led to the formation of some tribes, and we'll talk about them on the other side of the break.
888-318-7884, 888-31-TRUTH. The show is Catholic Answers Live. I am Chris Check, your host for today. My guest, Jimmy Akin. We will be right back after this.
Hi, this is Cy. I'm really proud of the 2 episodes of Catholic Answers Focus that we have for you this week. And if you haven't yet become a subscriber to our free podcast, this is definitely the week you should start. Monday, we've got an interview with Father Hugh Barber about the relationship between your soul and the Blessed Trinity. How is it that the triune God relates to your soul? Talk about news you can use. And Wednesday, we tackle Christopher Columbus with the world's leading Columbus scholar, Dr. Carol Delaney. Is it time to give up on Columbus? In the light of modern scholarship, should we be taking down Columbus statues and murals? Prepare to be surprised by the truth of the man. Subscribe to Catholic Answers Focus wherever you get your podcasts, or listen anytime at CatholicAnswersFocus.com.
Everybody's favorite Catholic outer space delivery pilots returned for their greatest adventure yet in the brand new graphic novel Weapons of War. Fresh from saving the solar system in The Truth Is Out There and saving the timeline of salvation history in The Big Picture, Brendan and Irk land in a magnificent domed city on Mars for what is supposed to be a simple shuttle job. But soon they find themselves caught up in a sinister assault on faith and freedom. Will Mars be lost to the enemy? Brendan and Irk's only hope for the flight is in the power of God's sacramental gifts. A totally new kind of Catholic resource for apologetics and evangelization, The Truth Is Out There series combines the visual excitement and quirky humor of graphic novels with solid popular philosophy and theology. The result is a series in which everyone from teens to adults can find accessible answers to questions about God, the soul, true happiness, and much more. Order your copy of Weapons of War today by calling 844-239-4952, by visiting shop.catholic.com, or asking for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Tomorrow on More to Life, all shook up.
Feeling anxious? Shaken up? We're going to help you find your peace.
That's tomorrow on More to Life. Now, back to Catholic Answers.
Hey, it's the groovy music.
It is the Thursday groovy music, featuring Nick Chamberlain on the drums and my own son Nicholas Check on lead guitar. The Dead Century. I don't want to waste your time. Barbara, before the break, you had some questions about some unhappy divisions in the church surrounding the liturgical reforms. Yeah. Jimmy.
Yeah. So prior to the Second Vatican Council, there was a form of liturgy that was had been used here in the Latin Church for quite a number of centuries, and a lot of people, when there was a reform of the liturgy after the Second Vatican Council, a lot of people didn't like it. They were attached to the liturgy the way it was, and so they liked things the way they were. They had a "if it ain't broke, don't fix it" attitude. On the other hand, some people really liked the new liturgy, the new rite of the Mass, and so they were big fans of it. Now, in principle, you can have either spirituality. The church doesn't teach that one must like one form of the liturgy more than another. In fact, those aren't the only 2 liturgies there are. Even in the Latin Church, there are other forms like the Dominican Rite or the Ambrosian Rite or the Anglican use. And in other Catholic churches like the Melkite Church or the Byzantine Church or the Chaldean Church. There are other rites of the Mass yet, and the Church has no teaching that any of them is superior to any of the others. And because, as St. Paul says, Christ willed his body to have a diversity, we're not all meant to be the same, it's okay if one of these if one of these forms of spirituality speaks to you more than another. Totally fine. The key is, though, not to look down on other people who have different spiritualities. This is something that this is a principle that St. Paul applies in the context of spiritual gifts. If you want to read about it, look at 1 Corinthians 12 to 14, where he's dealing with people, some of whom have the gift of tongues, of speaking in tongues, and they're looking down on people who don't have the gift of speaking in tongues. Well, St. Paul says, look, in a human body, there are many members, and they don't all have the same function. He says, if everything were an eye, where would the sense of hearing be? You need both vision and hearing to have a functioning human body. And in the same way, Christ willed that we as Christians have differences that can all work together. And you shouldn't look down on someone just because they're different from you in the church. As long as what they're doing is permitted by the church, they can have their own preferences. And so of any of the liturgies that the church has, if you prefer a certain one, totally fine. That's just one of your differences compared to some other folks. And that those differences working harmoniously together enrich the body of Christ the way all of the different parts of our physical bodies enrich the functioning of the whole. But then we've got to deal with human sin, because we live in a fallen world and people form tribes and they put too much emphasis on their tribe and they look down on members of other tribes and they start looking for things that they can use as identity markers to say, are you one of us or not? And after the Second Vatican Council and the liturgical reform that followed it, liturgy, being one of the most notable visible changes to Catholic life, became a tribal identity marker. So you had people in the progressive tribe saying, yay, yay, new liturgy. Oh, that's so much better than that horrible old liturgy we had before Vatican II. And they would look down on people who were attached to the old liturgy. But every action has an equal and opposite reaction, as Sir Isaac taught us. And so you also had people who were attached to the old liturgy that started using it as a tribal identity marker, saying, oh, the old liturgy is just so much better. You're not a real Catholic if you like the newer rite of liturgy. And both of those tendencies are sinful because they both are not inspired by charity. They are inspired by a desire to glorify you and your tribe, and they're a form of virtue signaling. And to say, look how righteous I am, look how virtuous I am. I like the new Mass. Or look how virtuous I am. I like the old Mass. The truth is, both are approved by the Church. You can have your preference for what speaks to you spiritually. That's totally legitimate. But you shouldn't think that everybody has to have that same resonance that you do, and you shouldn't think that someone is an inferior Catholic if their preference is different than you are. St. Paul urged harmony and charity among the members of the body of Christ, and that's the principle that needs to apply here too.
How's that, Barbara?
That's great. If you don't mind, also, I thought an earlier question sounded a little bit like y'all were saying that it was okay for communion in a church that was not in communion with Rome. Is that what you were saying?
No. Under ordinary circumstances, Catholics are not permitted to receive in other churches. There are some exceptions, like if you're in the middle of Russia and there's no Catholic church nearby, but there is an Eastern Orthodox church there that has valid sacraments, well, then you could receive in the Eastern Orthodox Church. But that's an exceptional circumstance. It's not the ordinary situation.
All right, Barbara?
The lady the lady it was when the lady said that she in Orange County that there was these churches that were not a part of the diocese. It was under that.
Right. What Jimmy said is
and
that. Go ahead, Jimmy.
We
sorry.
explained that they appear to be schismatic churches, and even though their sacraments are valid, presumably, it is not lawful under ordinary circumstances for a Catholic to receive the sacraments from them.
Okay, got that distinction, Barbara?
Valid. How can it be valid if it's
Okay, there's a distinction between validity and lawfulness. Valid means God is at work in the sacrament. So in the case of the Eucharist, if the Eucharist is valid, that means Jesus really becomes present. He is really present in the Eucharist. Transubstantiation happens. On the other hand, just because Jesus is present doesn't mean you're authorized by law to receive the sacrament from that priest. And consequently, it can be valid in that Jesus is really there, but still not be lawful for you to receive from that priest because, for example, the church doesn't want to encourage disobedience by authorizing people to go to any priest at all in the world.
All right, does that help with valid and licit or lawful? As Jimmy says, we do want to go and take some more calls.
Go ahead. That's okay. Thank you.
All right. God bless you, Barbara.
Feel free to call in another time, Barbara, and we can spend more time on that.
Sure. Anonymous, you're up next. Go ahead.
Hello. I had a question about a coworker of mine is a professed Christian, but denies the doctrine of the Trinity. And he says that in the Gospels, the term Son of God is used upwards of 60 times, but there are only a few instances in which Jesus is referred to in a way that could be interpreted as him being divine. How do I respond to that, and what further resources should I look into for defending Trinitarianism?
Okay. So I guess the first thing that needs to be clarified is the statistical argument that he's making. It's true that various terms for Jesus get used more than others, and Son of Man is one of the more common ones, as is Son of God. And the thing is, we need to know what those terms mean. And one of the things that's relevant are the passages that either on Jesus's own lips or on the part of the inspired author of Scripture. And it's not just in the Gospels, it's also in the other books of the New Testament that talk about Jesus being God. But there are these passages that do talk about Jesus being God. So how many do you need to prove it? One. You need one passage where Jesus says, I'm God, or one passage where an inspired author of the New Testament says Jesus is God. And we have more than one. So if Jesus Christ himself tells you this and you're a Christian, it should settle the matter for you. Or if the authors writing under the Holy Spirit's inspiration tell you this, even if they only say it once, you can trust them because the Holy Spirit backs up what they're saying. So once you realize that all I need is one, it then becomes a study of, well, let's look at these individual passages, and there are a variety of them. One of them that you may want to look at is in John chapter 8, where Jesus talks about how Abraham saw his day and rejoiced, and his critics say, well, how can you say that? Abraham, you're not even 50 years old yet. How could you have seen Abraham? And Jesus says, well, before Abraham was, I am. And he uses the phrase, I am, which is one of the names of God. And his critics clearly understand him to claim to be God. At that moment, it is not ambiguous because they think he's just blasphemed, and so they pick up stones to stone him. They're going to execute him for blasphemy, for claiming to be God. John even talks about how he made himself equal to his father equal to God by calling God his father. So this is an explicit theme in the New Testament. And it's not the only place, even in the Gospel of John. At the very beginning of the Gospel of John, first verse, In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And then it goes on to identify Jesus as the Word. At the end of the gospel, at the resurrection, Thomas confesses Jesus to be my Lord and my God. And Jesus accepts that worship. He doesn't rebuke Thomas. So even here within the Gospel of John, we have multiple instances of Jesus Jesus recognizing his divinity. We find other passages in Paul's epistles and so forth where, Jesus is referred to as our Lord and God and so forth. In terms of further resources for study, you can always check Catholic.com. There are a variety of different books. It's actually kind of common in apologetics, but I would simply Google Bible versus Trinity or Bible versus Divinity of Christ, and you'll come up with quite a number of resources that should be of assistance.
Anonymous, we got to go to break, but I thank you for that call. Jimmy, as you know, I like to read, and I like to read things that are printed on paper, which is why one of my favorite projects here that we do at Catholic Answers is our award-winning magazine, Catholic Answers Magazine. And I want to encourage all of our listeners who are not subscribers to subscribe to the magazine, because it is a very painless way. Every other month, you get a lesson in apologetics in a magazine that comes right to your mailbox. And so you steadily get better and better at defending the Catholic faith. We have packaged digital copies of Catholic Answers Magazine together so that you can get many years of the magazine for less than $10 a year. In fact, you can get 8 years worth of digital magazine issues for just $39.95. That's 48 issues of Catholic Answers Magazine for $39.95. That's about $5 a year. How do I take advantage of this awesome deal? Visit the ebook and magazine section at shop.catholic.com and check out our new offerings. Right back after this.
So, some Jehovah's Witnesses knock on your door. You're ready to defend Jesus' divinity, but they throw you a curveball and deny the divinity of the Holy Spirit. What do? Well, first, you could turn to 1 Corinthians 2:11, where Paul says, "No one comprehends the thoughts of God except the Spirit of God." If the Spirit can comprehend the infinite thoughts of God, he must be infinite, and thus God. You could then turn to Acts chapter 5, verses 1 through 4, and here Peter rebukes Ananias and Sapphira for lying to the Holy Spirit. But then a few sentences later says they lied to God. How can lying to the Holy Spirit be the same as lying to God unless the Holy Spirit is God? So with verses like these, you can hit that curveball and defend the divinity of the Holy Spirit. I'm Carlo Broussard with a ready reason for Catholic Answers, Catholic.com.
He is only one of 4 popes honored as the Great.
Matthew Bunsen and the Doctors of the Church.
St. Leo I was pope at a time when Roman civilization was being overrun by barbarian armies. He stood as a light in the darkness and even saved the city of Rome from destruction by Attila and the Huns. Leo died in 461.
For more about the Doctors of the Church, visit doctorsofthechurch.com.
(888) 318-7884, 888-31-TRUTH, Catholic Answers Live. Chris Check sitting in for Cy Kellett. Jimmy Akin is my guest. Barbara, if you're still listening from Louisiana, visit Catholic.com and put in the search for valid masses. It's kind of a tricky title there, but that'll give you, Jimmy Akin has a piece on Catholic.com about this distinction between valid and licit that I feel like we didn't, maybe you left us before you had that clear in your head. Mike in New Jersey, listening on WFJS. Welcome to Catholic Answers Live.
Hi, thank you, gentlemen. Jimmy, last hour you spoke to a caller about God hardening Pharaoh's heart. You basically said that the Bible on this matter says X, but really means not X. But if the Bible wanted to impart that X was what happened, then it would use this exact same language. Doesn't saying not X is what happens just a presupposition?
No, it's not a presupposition. It's supported by evidence. And I covered some of that evidence in the previous hour, where I illustrated how hyperbole gets used in the Bible, and I illustrated a few instances of hyperbole. We use hyperbole in English, and there's a little bit of a problem with characterizing it as X versus not X. Some people might take that to mean the opposite of X, but really it just means something different than what is literally said. And that's obvious. It's a phenomenon that occurs in every human language. Hyperbole and metaphor are human universals. They just crop up in every human language. They're built into human nature, and thus they manifest in human consciousness all over the world. We have lots of them here in English. In fact, every verb that we have that's not directly sensory in nature is ultimately derived from a metaphor. Like if I say, I understand you, I understand your point. Well, you don't literally have a physical point that I am literally physically standing underneath. The phrase, I understand your point, is based on a metaphor that we are so familiar with that we've even stopped thinking about the physical nature of this metaphor. And that's true of every single verb. Understand, grasp, I grasp your point. Every single verb we have that's not directly physical, everything describing our mental life is based on metaphor. We also clearly have hyperbole. Like I mentioned in the previous hour, thanks a million. It's a common exaggeration here in English. We have lots of others too. Roll out the red carpet. If I say we've got a dignitary coming, we need to roll out the red carpet, I don't mean there is literally a red carpet that we should unroll. I mean that we need to do everything we can to make the person feel welcome and respected. So every language has these. English has them. Hebrew has them. The question is learning how to identify them. As native English speakers, we have a pretty good grasp of when figures of speech are being used in English. But we're not native Hebrew speakers, and we're not native speakers of the kind of Hebrew that was used 3,000 years ago when the Old Testament was being written. To acquire a knowledge of that, you have to do some study. And so in the course of study, that involves bringing in different lines of evidence. Some lines of evidence are linguistic in nature. Some are theological in nature, like a knowledge from the book of James that God doesn't actually literally tempt people to sin. So any statement that he would needs to be understood in some other sense. So we bring in both biblical data, linguistic data, theological data, and all of that together helps us form an improved understanding of the meaning of various passages.
What do you think, Mike?
I've got a few problems with that, but I know we're running up against the hour. Thanks a million.
Call us another time then.
Yeah.
Well,
call us another time.
Is an idiom, but you would say that you could use that to show a lack of gratitude, or that raining hats of dogs means a bright sunny day. And, there has to be, it can't be its polar opposite. It can't be that God said, sat by.
Okay, Mike, I'm sorry, but I don't want to race through this. I want to make sure that I'm able to give you a good answer, and we're getting close to the hour, and we've got other people who have been waiting a long time. So really, please do call back on another day when I'm on the air, either a Bible Questions Day or an open forum, and I'll be more than happy to do what I can to be of assistance in dealing with your follow-up. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mike. Let's go to Araceli in Hollis, Oklahoma, listening on the Catholic Answers Live app. Araceli, welcome to Catholic Answers Live.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
My question is, what are the Church's teachings on the illumination of conscience, and how serious should we take those prophecies?
The illumination of conscience is an event that is talked about in some circles. The basic idea is that at some moment in the future, God, as part of his plan, is going to let everybody have an inner insight into the state of their conscience, like their sins will be revealed to them, or their state of holiness or lack thereof will be revealed to them. And it'll be effectively kind of a worldwide call to repent or something like this. It'll be a supernatural miracle that happens all over the world. This is an idea that's been proposed in various private revelations that have been reported. And consequently, because of that, the church has no teaching on this. This is not a matter of church teaching. It is a matter of prophetic speculation. Now, then the second question was, how seriously should we take it? Well, all things being equal, unless I have special knowledge of a particular apparition and the evidence for or against it, my guidepost is to say, well, has the church approved it or not? Because the church has an approval process for private revelations. It looks at them, it evaluates, are they consistent with the Catholic faith? Is there evidence that this was supernatural as opposed to just being somebody's imagination or trickery or something like that? And as far as I am aware, the illumination of conscience is not talked about in approved apparitions. So since I am not aware of approved apparitions that talk about this concept, I don't give it a significant amount of credibility. In the future, the church may have an opportunity to look at some of these apparitions and evaluate them. Obviously, in every life, God does give us moments of illumination where we examine our own conscience. But in terms of, will there be some big worldwide event in the future where this happens to everybody all at once? That's something that the church has not signed off on and has not even approved apparitions of that I am aware of that deal with it.
All right, Shelley, we're going to try to get in a couple more calls, but thank you very much for your question. Carol in Pennsylvania watching on YouTube Live. Carol, what's your question for Jimmy?
Hi. I live in a community that believes in the rapture. Where I go to church, they do not believe in it, and I believe it is not biblical. Is it or isn't it?
Well, it depends on what you mean. There is an event that St. Paul describes in 1 Thessalonians 4:17, where all the believers, living and dead, will be caught up to be with Jesus Christ. The question is, when is, and some people call that the rapture. The question is, when will this occur? Most of the people who talk about the rapture think it's at some point before the end of the world, before the definitive second coming. But if you do a careful study of 1 Thessalonians and 2 Thessalonians, it's clear that this event happens at the very end of the world, right before the resurrection of the dead. If you'd like more information, go to Catholic.com, type in the word rapture. We've got a bunch of resources for you.
There's a great book by Paul Thigpen, a friend of ours, called The Rapture Trap from Ascension Press that I recommend. Julio in Tampa, Florida, you've got about 15 seconds to ask your question.
Okay, real quick then. My question is, purgatory. Going back to purgatory, I heard you talking about that earlier. I have two
What's
kids,
the question?
35 and a 37 that passed away. And I know that Catholics pray to get people out of purgatory.
Well, we can and do pray for the departed, that God will help them in their process of purification so they'll be ready for heaven, whether it's long or short. If you'd like to learn more about that, go to Catholic.com, type in purgatory. There are a bunch of resources there. And since you mentioned, Julio, that you lost somebody, if I heard correctly, let's ask everyone in the audience to say a quick prayer for your friend, that God will help him be purified swiftly and easily and enjoy the eternal glory of heaven with him.
All right, Julio, thank you so much for that call. Or Julio, I'm sorry. Jimmy, we made it through all the calls with a couple of seconds to spare there.
How about that?
Good. Well, what's in store for you?
Well, tomorrow on our Friday edition of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, we have the first of a two-part episode on St. Thomas Aquinas' teachings about the occult. He had a remarkable amount to say about the occult, and we're going to tell you about the teachings of St. Thomas Aquinas on all kinds of strange subjects.
I noticed that also is an article in the latest issue of Catholic Answers magazine.
That's right.
So, so another reason to subscribe. My friends, thank you for being with us. Cy Kellett will be back with you tomorrow. It's been my pleasure to be your guest host. Thank you for your patience. Thank you to Nick Chamberlain on the engineer board, Marie screening the calls, and Zach manning the many, many cameras. And I see our social media young man there in the back lining up something for Instapin or something, or what, Face Friend?
Snapface.
Snapface. God bless you all. See you in, Cy will see you in, 23 hours. God bless.